I want to welcome everyone to the Free Agent Podcast. The discussion is all about free agency and taking control over your future. The mission of my show is to share inspiring conversations with real people who took the leap from corporate life into free agency. Some of them are going into self-employment, some are business ownership, franchising. All of us are looking for freedom, though. From corporate refugees and executives tired of the desk job to entrepreneurs and investors looking to share camaraderie and inspiration through their own business journey, my podcast aims a spotlight on real people who stepped into the unknown, took control of their destiny, and became their own boss. Now, that conversation doesn't take place every day. There are some of us who are business owners and in the last year or so have found ourselves experiencing some crazy ups and downs, navigating the sneak attack that was the pandemic and still dealing with it here in 2021. But on the other hand, we are also seeing owners who are, and corporations, individuals who are producing amazing, successful outcomes. So today I want to welcome three great people to the podcast. We're going to shift direction a little bit today. Rather than just interviewing one individual about their leap, I do have the epitome of a free agent here. That's Pamela Belyn. She is a corporate refugee who left on purpose and became a business owner. We're also joined by Corbin Beastrom, who is an executive recruiter. He's got clients and prospects, mostly in the Midwest, but he has worked all across the country. And then we've got Allan Dykstra, who is located in Denver and is a corporate culture specialist, but also focuses on finding your why and building great teams and finding happiness along the way. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what I would like to start with is just each of you giving a brief update on who you are, what you do, and how things are going out there. And then we'll get into the more dynamic conversation. So Pamela, why don't you tell the audience about your transition from corporate into business ownership?
Thank you for having me. So as she said, my name is Pamela Belyn, and I am a former corporate attorney who took the leap, and now I am the proud owner of two different sewer construction companies. One I acquired, and the other is a franchise. So I've got experience a little bit on both sides, being, an independent business owner and a franchisee. So definitely different experiences, but so far it works for me and what we are trying to achieve. Buying that first company and, professionalizing its operations and getting people on board with change was great. We had a good operating customer base, but the expansion was not going to come organically. And I felt that instead of starting another company to service residential, because that company had historically never serviced residential, buying a franchise with systems in place, sort of like just follow the operating manual, I could get that piece, that residential piece that I was missing. So that's how I ended up with a regular, standalone company and a franchise. It's very unusual, but it works. So now we have a complete vertical. We do commercial, industrial, and residential. It just happens to be two companies.
And it actually happens more than people think. When I'm working with individuals or investors who are looking at a franchise, so many of them already have a business, whether it's a standalone or a franchise, and they're looking for that other thing that, to your point, what you did is to bolt on something else that helps you capture. You're still leveraging your same employee base and maybe the same marketing, but you're shifting to a different population of consumers.
Yeah. And also too, the name of the original company was so ubiquitous in sort of like that industrial area. You don't want an industrial truck showing up at your house to rot a toilet. I mean, that's overkill. So we needed something, a different name and new in that marketplace.
And dirty jobs. We've got a woman. I am in the same position. We own a business where we do dirty jobs and heavy lifting.
Yes, so the dirtiest.
We will dive into that as well. Pardon the pun regarding sewers. But Josh, why don't you tell us about your business and how you got where you are?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Allan Dykstra. I help lead a company called Helios, and we make an app called Love Work. And Love Work is basically a scalable team-based wellness program for middle managers, right? So as many of you may know, if you come from the corporate space at all, at any point in your life, the middle folks get squeezed and don't get nearly as much attention and love as they should. But we help large organizations, like 1,000 people or larger, reduce burnout and feel more energized at work. And I came into this from a very circuitous, strange, odd pathway through music and performing music, and then all sorts of other strange and odd jobs along the way, where I realized most people don't like their work, and really wanted to make a dent in that challenge, because work is such a central orbiting kind of part of our lives, right? So if we love our work, our lives are better, and if we don't, our lives are not. So, trying to do my best to make an impact there.
Really interesting year of transitions, thanks to the pandemic. And so this notion of work from home coming to an end, and people facing the reality of, do they love what they do? Well, then, Corbin, you're talking to people who are in transition right now. And so talk about the work that you do and what the pulse is right now.
Yeah, thanks, Meg. Yes, I'm Corbin Beastrom here in Chicago. I've been an executive recruiter in the recruiting space for just over 3 years. And in that time, I started in Salt Lake City, a growing middle market, and I really started at the more entry-level space, hourly workers, 15, 25 an hour. But moved on to San Francisco and got to experience all things tech and California and all that excitement. Of course, California and San Francisco deeply impacted by COVID. So my wife and I said, I think Chicago is the place for us. So came back to Chicago, doing more executive search now, director, C-suite level. But in that process, I think I've really seen there's a lot of commonality across those markets and across those levels of employment. People, regardless of education background, regardless of where they stand on the ladder, all kind of have this desire for more freedom, for more fulfillment, and that just kind of resonates across the board. And so, I think one thing that you do, Meg, and that this panel can speak to is you have options. It's not just what the boss is telling you. It's not just what you think you're supposed to do, but think broadly and be in a position to make a very conscientious choice about what you do for a living.
Yes. And so here we are at the end of first quarter of 2021, and talk a little bit, Corbin, about the state of hiring right now. I think that for a lot of people who are forced out of a job, becoming a free agent, owning their own business is kind of a scary proposition. But what's the pulse right now that you're seeing relative to the health of hiring in this coming year?
Yeah, no, I'd like to go back, really to March of 2020. At that time, we were coming off of a record-setting job market, best economy since like 1969. There was this feeling of, if you're not where you want to be, go out and get it. Certainly, COVID changed that. People kind of looked around and said, oh my gosh, this high unemployment. Am I, just grateful to be employed? That was kind of objective number one, is hold on to the job you have. Say that, I think that period lasted through maybe March through the summer. And then really some things started to change as a result of people settling into a work from home reality and feeling more comfortable. We saw an uptick in executive search. The C-suite and the senior level placement industry did very, very well in 2020. So a little different than what you might expect or certainly saw in the news. And then in that middle space, your point, Josh, a lot of people in that manager level, senior associate level, if they didn't feel very attached to their employer going into the pandemic, they felt even less so towards the end of 2020. That connection was weaker. A lot of companies prioritized maybe the bottom line or some initiatives that weren't so centric to the employee experience, which just kind of exacerbated any disconnect on the employees side. So as a recruiter, I think I spent most of Q4 fielding calls from people saying, is there a greener pasture? Are you talking to somebody who is, with it and people really looking for a better home? So kind of living in that space. We're seeing hiring uptick in that middle and lower parts of the economic scale, through Q4 into Q1. So that's all good. And I think now we're starting to have to think through, where do I want to be post-pandemic, not, just where do I want to be during the pandemic? And so that's kind of brought this whole, second question of, work from home, blended schedules. Do I reload markets? So it continues to move.
It's going to be a very interesting year. So 2020 pushed a lot of people out. Pamela, talk about your reasons for leaving your past role. Yours was very much not a push as much as a pull, it seems.
That's true. And so I actually semi-retired from the practice of law in 2016. So this was like really pre-pandemic. And that the impetus was mostly for the schedule flexibility. So in all of my years, as a corporate attorney, as a parent, you've always sort of like jumped to the schedule of whatever your clients want, whatever the deal was. I did a lot in the mergers and acquisition space. So it was a lot of deal driven, time sensitive work. And I found myself one day taking a conference call with a bunch of New York attorneys at 11 o'clock at night with a sleeping baby in my lap. And I'm like, absolutely not. I can't do this anymore. So that's kind of the impetus to be able to control my own schedule. I mean, there was no reason for the call to happen at 11 o'clock at night. Just because they could, they wanted to. So they made the rest of us on the other end of the deal, jump to their schedule. And there was no reason for it. It could have waited until morning, could have waited till business hours. There was, it was ego driven. And I just didn't want to spend the rest of my career like that. So that's what prompted that. It's like, okay, what else can I do? That prompted that initial question. Then the next deal that I worked on, a gentleman, multiple years in business, was selling his company, was not getting the price he wanted. I'm like, I convinced him to take it off the market for a while. We cleaned up a bunch of stuff that he had been ignoring over the years as a business owner, because, they don't have time for that. They're in the day to day. We cleaned all that up, put it back on the market. The highest offer he got on his original entry into the market was $25 million. And we finally ended up selling his company for $78 million. So then I came home. I'm like, why am I not doing this for myself again? So that's kind of where it kind of like really took off. Like, okay, I can do this. And that's kind of how it took off from there. And just, fate would have it. I met the woman who owned the business that I had initially purchased. I met her literally with the intent to represent her in the sale of the company because she was ready to exit. We hit it off. She wore me down and I bought the company. So
dirty jobs and all. It's amazing how these flight of the bumblebees, these conversations randomly take us to a new landing spot. Yeah. And the rewards and we'll get to that, the rewards of owning your own business. Obviously there are challenges, but we'll talk about what the rewards are. Josh, you are seeing a lot of the people similar to Pamela or whom Corbin is talking about. How do you help people find that happiness in their current job? And if they can't find it in their current job, how do you help them identify what they should be looking for? Yeah.
From our perspective, what the real key is something we call energy intelligence. And so what that is it's understanding what brings you to life, or what brings you energy and joy, and what sucks the life out of you, and what drains your energy and prevents your joy. And so this is in our work, this has been a much more practical and realistic pathway, then there's certainly plenty of people who talk about passion and following your passion and all of that. It's a little nebulous and gooey for us, though. If you learn to understand what energizes you, it's much more visceral. You can feel it. Most of us have been trained to ignore that feeling, especially at work. Right? Work is about powering through and getting the job done. And so a big part of this is understanding, like kind of reawakening to our somatic nature and understanding that our bodies are really good energy detectors. If we pay attention, we can tell when we feel energized or when we don't. It's just that most of us choose to ignore it, or I've learned to ignore it over time. And so I would say, start there, really start to pay attention to what brings you energy and what doesn't. You can get really specific and granular about this in your work because it might not be the meeting, right? It's probably something in the meeting that's actually draining your energy. Right? So get really specific, or it might be something, it might not be, something that it might not be the brainstorming. It might actually be the strategy inside the brainstorming that you really like. So get as specific as you possibly can, because then what you can do is you can create a roadmap for yourself, right? And you deliberately put more energizing things in your pathway, and you try to remove the things that drain you from your pathway. And of course, being a business owner is a great way to do this, right? Because you have a lot of autonomy and you can hire people to do things that don't energize you. So that's a strong case, I think, for going down this path. And in any job, I would like to tell you, you've got more autonomy than you think you do. You've got more authority to tweak things, to change the how of your work than you might think. So almost everyone can do this more than they realize.
And I definitely agree with that. When I first took on the company, I tried to empower the technicians to change the nature of their job. No one wants to do this kind of work. Some people are good at it. Some people, but it's tough work. It's dirty work. It smells bad. But, being able to, I literally went on a listening tour. I went out for the first 3 months with every crew every day to see what they did on a day-to-day basis, help them do what they do on a day-to-day basis, because I didn't want to ask them to do something I wasn't willing to do myself. And they found that empowering, that I could see what they did, listen to their concerns about how or what they were doing. And I think that energized them to give them that autonomy, just listening to them. So I guess my advice to somebody, would be just ask your boss. The worst that could happen is they say no. Ask to do more of the things that energize you, or do more of the things that make your job less discouraging, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah. And there's a clear win-win there too, which is because when you do something in a way that energizes you, you do it better. Right? So this isn't a trade-off where it's like, oh yeah, you just to go do all the things you love, and then you're not actually getting your work done. Right. So that's not what this is about either. But it's really about aligning your work with what brings you, puts you in a flow state, puts you in an energized state, and then you're actually more productive, not less.
Yep. We had fewer callbacks. That's how it affects the bottom line. When your employees are happy and satisfied, things get done, better, cheaper, faster. And that's what we're all looking for.
And that's a big point. Yeah, go ahead, Corbin.
I was going to say, and I think I've certainly seen this, and I've lived it myself, and the candidates I speak to have lived it. There's a reaction when things aren't going well to matrix everything on behalf of employers and leadership. Well, if it's not working, what do our rules say? What is our process? What is our handbook? Are they checking every box? And that is so against the way people actually work and what gets really quality work done. It's that intuitive, energizing piece. That's why people, do what they do. And I think your point is dead on, Josh, because when a leader or a leadership is struggling, going through uncertainty, and they choose not to empower the employees and be employee-centric, focus on their gifts, what is going to make them do a better job, and they choose to turn it all into KPIs, your workforce starts to talk to people like me. They may say, I'm bought in. Yes, I'm going to, what's the plan? I'll get you that report every day on my activity, or I'll send this to you. And if you're the boss and you think, great, they're really falling in line, they're not. They're talking to other employers because they want that. It's kind of symbiotic, right? They want to bring themselves to work. They want to be fueled by their work. And I think that's what we're looking for. And, from a practical standpoint, if you're not getting that, and if you're routinely not getting that, I think, Pamela, you're the perfect example of saying, I'll make it for myself. And I love that door is always open.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
And really interesting to me, Josh, you and I have talked about this, how the work from home coming to an end, people looking at their employers and the culture that they left in the office last March. Glass ceilings, railroaded into meetings, ageism, sexism, office politics, all the things that drive people to Corbin, whether some people are leaving on purpose, very purposefully looking for new roles, and other people are being pushed out. But you and I have talked about the changes that are coming up here in the second to third quarter with the end of work from home. Talk about some of the things that you're seeing with corporate culture and how these leaders, and Corbin, you can probably address this too. You're seeing these employers, should they be doing in order to make employees want to come back, make employees more sticky?
Yeah. I just missed, some of you may have seen this too. I just saw an article in Inc. this morning that 52% of people are they're going to be looking for new jobs. So I remember you and I talked about this, Meg, right? Our intuitive sense earlier this year was exactly where this was headed, right? That by and large, people are dissatisfied with all of the things you mentioned, all of the unrests going on for sure, and how employers have or have not, in more cases, addressed these things from a really human perspective. That so many times employers have chosen the bottom line, and they've chosen their own executive salaries over actually taking care of people. And it's leading to this massive disengagement, and like mental health was already a crisis in our workplaces. And now it's just been so exacerbated by everything that's happened. So yeah, I think, as we've, at least from our perspective, what leaders need to be doing is they need to be thinking about the whole human person. They need to be, we need to be providing ways for people to feel comfortable sharing their humanity at work. And some of this is happening, right? So I'm not trying to say that none of this is happening. I'm just saying, but overall, it needs to happen a lot more. That the way that we lead and the way that we engage and interact with our teams needs to become so much more about the human person, and so much more understand. And certainly, like, we've been pushed into this a little bit, right? You saw a construction worker walking behind me a second ago, right? Like we see each other's dogs and kids, and like, so we're like, some of that we've been forced into more humanity due to the work from home nature of things. I think the real danger with where we're moving towards is losing some of that, trying to force everybody back into the old way of doing things, where we feel how drained we've all been by this way of working, right? There's been joy in it, but there's also been draining elements. And so some of us are thinking, wow, a commute sounds pretty nice. Right? I guess I'll just go back to the office, because then at least I've got some sort of separation between home and work. And I would like to say that like, we should not be falling for that. We should not be giving up the gains we've made towards a more flexible human lifestyle for the sake of going back to a world where work is God. Right? Like, that is a very dangerous, this is going to be the temptation as people move back into it's the easier choice rather than taking a harder look at the way work happens. And leaders need to make some clearer boundaries about, hey, it is okay for you to be human. It is okay for you to have flexibility and love your families. Like, leaders need to be making those changes. Yeah. We can't just be relying on the office.
I think, Pamela,
how do you, do you sort of coach up those senior level executives to do just that? I mean, that's sort of what I'm hearing from my friends and colleagues, that, you know, they're now more anxious that, okay, well, we're not going to be able to work from home anymore, but I was so much more productive. You know, a couple of friends of mine, their companies had record 2020s with everybody working from home. And now they're like, all right, I'll come back and let's replicate that. I don't think you can replicate that in an office environment. So how do you coach up those executives to say, hey, it worked when they were working from home. Let's phase it back. Let's see who wants to come back. How do you even have that discussion?
Yeah. And this is one of the trickiest things, I think, Pamela, is because what it really requires is for leaders to think differently about the purpose of work. Right? Like we've got a system of work now that drives everything towards short-term gains and profits. And whenever that's the metric, right, no matter how much we say people are our greatest asset, we don't actually believe it. Right? We're really looking for money. And so there are some like just societal things I think we need to contend with at a broader level, to start having some conversations about what's the purpose of work. Right. And I think you like many of you said it at the beginning, right? That what we want from work is freedom, not just money. Right. Like, so I think there needs to be a broader conversation to get there. It's such a good question.
Corbin, you and I had talked about, and I think Pamela, you and I also had talked about this topic of taking a job so that you have the paycheck, but at what point do you realize you've just sold your soul to the devil in order to get that better job offer or whatever that might be? The management, the responsibility of leadership is really not to manage and tell people what to do, but a lot of those managers don't realize that great paycheck, that great opportunity. You're going to be told what to do, and you're going to be put in the silo. So, Corbin, how do you work with people who are looking at different opportunities, and maybe you can see the writing is on the wall that it's not the best opportunity for them, but they're attracted to this job? What are you seeing?
Yeah, no, I think, for me, I always want to get a sense of who the person is and why they're looking. And there's a business case for that too, in addition to it being the right thing. Because my job as a recruiter is to make a placement. That's our business model. If I give someone or I package a role that's not right in order to get them to take it, it will not work out. They'll either quit early on or 6 months later, they'll be talking to someone else and they'll be really disappointed with how Corbin and his group treated them. Misrepresentation happens all the time. So it doesn't make sense to do that. So I always start with really getting an idea of what a person is looking for, that what are you energized by, and can I connect you with an opportunity that, best of my judgment, is going to energize you.
And so, Pamela, when you went through law school, you had a series of jobs. We all know from history that law is one of the bigger grinds. And so now that you have jumped the fence and you are the employer, what are the points of happiness, not only for you, but also as you interact with your employees?
So, as an attorney, if you think about, there are like 2,000 billable hours in a working year, but most attorneys have billable hour requirements of, 22 to 2,600 billable hours. So how many hours do you have to be in the office per week to get all that to be billable? Because not every hour is a billable hour. You still have administrative things to do. You have business development things to do. None of those count towards that billable hour. And now add on parent, spouse, just human onto that equation. It doesn't work. There are not enough hours in the day. And so that is where I needed to find something else to do. And obviously the allure of business ownership is you can set your own schedule. So when it was just the one company, I literally only worked during school hours. So I only worked from 9 to 3. And I had an infant at that time. So, I couldn't, just work anytime. 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. seemed to be a good time. But most employers don't want you in the office in those hours, So I needed that flexibility just to do what I needed to do for my family, because law is very traditional. Law is very narrow in its thinking of how to think about employment. And so, there's still some old school partners out there that want FaceTime. Okay, so I can sit in an office from 7 to 7, but why?
Yeah.
I could be doing the exact same thing at a laptop from home versus sitting here so you can see me working. So I needed that kind of flexibility, and business ownership was a way to get that.
And being there when your kids go to school, get on the bus, you're there when they get off the bus is meaningful, not only to them, but there's a reason why we as women have children and are wired up to be nurturing. It's one of the greatest benefits of being a mother and a spouse and a business owner is to be able to wear all these different hats. And I think that some corporate employees get so siloed that they forget that they're already wearing a number of hats. But business ownership then for you has been a great diversification strategy, not only for your skill sets, but also income wise. How did you weather 2020?
So the beginning of the pandemic was a little scary because the second company bought the franchise and opened our doors in February of 2020. So like the week before everything shut down is when the franchise was out there hitting the road, servicing people. So that was a little scary. We never fully shut down because if you think about what happened, everybody went home. Not everybody should be cooking. Not everybody is using more of the deteriorating infrastructure in their old apartment buildings, condo buildings, what have you. And so we still worked. We never fully shut down, but just finding a new way to work, asking a lot of questions up front before we sent a crew to someone's home or a apartment or place of business. So just navigating that and making sure that we had PPE and asking the guys, what would make you feel comfortable still working under these conditions? Because regardless, pandemic or not, we deal with worse things in the sewer than coronavirus. So this was not unheard of for us. Extra pair of gloves, more Tyvek suits, and a face shield. We're good to go. So.
Great. That's one thing about plumbing is that it doesn't matter about a pandemic, a recession, Mother Nature. It's all plumbing needs to.
People just want to be able to run the garbage disposal, flush the toilet, and just okay. Public service announcement: flushable wipes are not flushable. Do not believe the packaging, or you will be calling me.
Oh, brother. Well, if that isn't the truth. So if anyone is in Chicago, we'll make sure that they have your contact information because they will be needing it. Are there topics that each of the three of you would like to volunteer to talk about at this point about getting unstuck in 2021 and point of view that you would like to share?
Yeah, I actually want to pick up on something that Pamela spoke to. You use the term old school partners. I'm not a lawyer, but there are old school partners in every industry. And even pre-pandemic, when I first got out of school and was working, there were a lot of things that I was just like, why? Why does the director? Why is the manager doing it this way? And having no leverage, you're the new hire, and the logic is, I've put in my time. I've been here 15 years. I've been here 20 years. You should have seen how hard it was in the 90s. I'm going to replicate that model for you, and when you get through it, you'll be here if you make it, right? And it never made sense because it's this model in which the people at the top are acknowledging that they didn't like it when they were coming up. And now that they're there, they're reinforcing it. And so I think from a coaching standpoint to leaders, I don't know where that disconnect happens. But I do want to make that point, be open-minded, recognize that your experience is not the experience of your employees. The time in which you came up in your industry is not the time in which your reports are coming up. So know that. And then on the employee side, because we've had such volatility, and I think there have been some legitimate changes in corporate America in that 10-year and, putting in your time and being able to have, the watch at 10 years and the trip at 15 and the bonus at 20 years, those are really kind of stripping away. I think in many ways post 2008, those perks started to fall away. They've really fallen away now. So what do we get in return from that? And I think it's the agency piece. So to up and comers, I just say, be committed, lean into every opportunity that you get. But don't lose sight of your agency. And, if you're not feeling it, if you've got, kind of that 50-50, there's nothing wrong in just keeping conversations going. Keep talking to other people, talk to peers, stay connected. If you interviewed somewhere and it didn't seem quite right, don't ghost that company. Keep the door open. You never know how your skill set and a company's needs will evolve. And you just want to be kind of in the know. And so that's kind of my evangelical stance I wanted to give today is, if you're an employer, don't replicate what you didn't like coming up. And if you're an employee out there, be your own, agent, be a free agent, even in corporate America, you can be a free agent.
And to that point, I had a friend who did just that. She was a finalist. They didn't hire her, but she kept in touch with them. And the person that they did hire didn't work out. And 6 months later, they called her, and now she's in that spot.
Very interesting how things have shifted too with the last year, and essential jobs, essential businesses needing to stay open, how they really did have to listen to the beat on the street. What is that employee experiencing, whether it's a hairstylist or plumber, sewage, et cetera, or someone higher up in the company who has to come in, it's manufacturing, whatever it might be. Employers had to pivot. It was really exciting for me to watch companies, whether there are our own companies that my husband and I own, and listening to our employees. What did they need in order to feel safe in the beginning? Well, now it's a whole different ballgame. How are they going to be fulfilled and happy to come to work going forward? So the fascinating evolution in the last year is the rapidity that technology is changing, but also that the workplace is changing and needs to adapt to continue to bring employees back. We do have an interesting thing going on with unemployment in the government and some of the changes for employers relative to tax credits and getting employees to come back to work. It's going to be a challenging year for some businesses, and yet the economy continues, people continue to spend, and people need their jobs and their paychecks in order to pay their bills. So Josh or Corbin, any other topics that I didn't touch on that you wish I had?
I had one thought coming up for me I'd love to share a tiny bit on. What I was feeling a little bit compelled to talk a tiny bit about is the topic of the future. As I think what's happening right now, kind of over and over, is we kind of are getting hit with new normals over and over, right?
Yeah.
And so it's gonna keep happening, right? Like this fall, right? As people try to move back, try to go back into the office, that's going to be a whole new normal again, because nobody knows that nobody has a clue how that's going to work. We've never navigated that before. And so I just wanted to encourage people a little bit to not really think of it as a new normal, but a next normal, because the idea of a new normal is passive. It's something that's going to happen to me, and then I have to adjust to it. And I think that really betrays a misunderstanding of how the future works, because the future isn't a defined anything. The future is what we create it to be. And so leaders, employees, business owners, all of us, like, we are all co-creating what we want the next normal to look like. And so I just wanted to encourage everybody listening that your agency, to your point, Corbin, right? We all have agency to help create the next normal. And if we want to keep the flexibility we have and the freedom we've gained, we can do that, but we need to have strong boundaries, and we need to have those conversations with our employers and leaders, that those things are not things we're going to negotiate on into the future. So
this enhanced productivity that I'm seeing, my son is 30 years old. He hasn't been in the office now. He's not going to get called back to the office. His productivity has gone up so tremendously with work from home. His year-end review was the best review he's ever gotten. And so this ability to be self-directed, busy, productive, doing better work. Why do you need to go back? Well, there are going to be reasons why we need to go back. And I do agree with you too, that this thought that it's static is very dynamic. What's going on every day is an evolution on this continuum. To your point, the new normal isn't a place we're going to arrive at. It's something we're going to evolve into on an ongoing basis.
We get to build it. Yeah.
So what I would like to do in wrapping up the conversation is each of you, so why don't we start with Josh, then Corbin, then Pamela, talk about how people can get in touch with you for your particular value proposition. Josh.
Yeah, wonderful. So I think the easiest way to get in touch with us is through our website. It's helios.work, so not .com, helios.work. And you'll be able to check out the Love Work experience there and learn more about it if you like. And there's an email address right in the top left corner, and you can, we'd love to connect with you if you've got some middle managers who need some extra love, or you've got some teams that you're trying to figure out how to navigate a virtual or hybrid, into the future world, how to keep your team together in these times. We'd love to chat with you about that.
You've got some great videos, and some of them are just really captivating that you've put out recently. So thank you for sharing those with me. And for the listeners or the watchers, you should check out Josh's videos. He's very insightful. Corbin, how can people reach out to you?
LinkedIn is best. Corbin Beastrom at LinkedIn. I live there. You'll probably see the green light on. Corbin Beastrom, for those of a certain demographic, if you knew Corbin Burnson, that's kind of like my name. So Corbin Beastrom on LinkedIn. And
what level individual are you looking to work most with?
Right now, I specialize in accounting and finance, manager to vice president level. Great. Good to know. Thank you.
And then Pamela, you've got your businesses and multiple businesses. What is the best way for people to reach you?
So the best way is through our website at Zoom Drain. It's ZOOMDRAIN.com, and our 1-800 number 866-CALL-ZOOM. And that's the easiest way to get in touch with us. I am also on LinkedIn as well, Pamela Belyn, and that's the best way to get in touch with us.
Perfect. Well, so my general opinion for anyone listening is that a job is necessary, income is necessary, but diversification in 2021 seems to be the real bell ringer here. Think of yourself not just as an individual in a job, but think of yourself as a corporation. You've got different divisions, you've got different output, different manufacturing, different revenue streams, and as an individual, having one source of income, we all found it last year, having one source of income is a dangerous thing in a pandemic. So think about diversification and with that, people will become less fearful and less bored, certainly. And to Josh, your point, all of you, really, that productivity is going to go up, satisfaction will go up. And I'm a big believer that joy does not come from your paycheck, it comes from within. And we should all find our joy and make this year a better year all the way around. So thank you all for joining me today.